Hello, hello, hello. I see the chat already popping. So I set myself up to be able to come in here and go live with y'all and talk about all of the things that are happening and going on in the city in regards to the Dollar House program. I'll be honest, I have been really quiet about this, at least publicly. So we talk about it a lot within Next Gen, our Next Gen Accelerator program. We talked about it during our last Mobilized Baltimore bus tour, but I wanted to take the time to talk about it with y'all today because it is so top of mind in conversation. So what I want you to do, if you are on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. You already know the deal, right? Make sure you're subscribed. We do share new videos every week, every Thursday. So make sure you do that on YouTube. Those of you who are joining via Instagram, what up? We're gonna get into it. I see y'all in here. But I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about what's going on. It's been a while since I did a live. And y'all know when I come with notes, we're about to get into it. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. So a few things real quick before we jump into it. I know a lot of people are super excited about Baltimore, which is great. We're very big that we don't just get excited about some of the numbers here and there, cheap houses and all that good stuff, but really focus on knowing and understanding Baltimore, understanding the history, all that good stuff. So if you haven't taken our free class, please do that. The next one is next Thursday. And we do have a Mobilized Baltimore bus tour. So an in-person opportunity to go around the city with us, look at properties with us, the whole 9 yards on June 18th. So make sure you get your spots because we always sell out. And I think we have less than half tickets left. All right. So with that, let's talk about what's going on. Okay. Let's get into it. I see y'all in the on YouTube and on the Instagram. So y'all know I like to chit chat in the chat room. So definitely engage with me there. Hey Janae, hi Jamal, hi Toya, hello, hey DJ, hey Doug, what's going on, y'all? All right, so let's start at the top because I'm talking about this today because some stuff went down yesterday. And let me also preface this by saying we know a lot of players, right? So we're not trying to ruffle any feathers. We just want folks to be informed about what's happening, what's going on, and be able to kind of clear through all the clutter because I'm not a big fan of how things are typically shared. And so what happened yesterday? So yesterday there was a public hearing at the city council meeting where City Council President Nick Mosby was bringing back up this Dollar House program, so House Baltimore, to talk about the opportunities of the program. So if you recall, I brought this up a couple months ago when this originally came up as a conversation. So the city is actually decided to join this committee basically across the country to say that they were going to try to combat homelessness, right? And so City Council President Nick Mosby came up with, well, why don't we bring back the Dollar House program? So in the new version of the Dollar House program, because remember, the Dollar House program was something that was available back in like the 80s. Folks were able to get a property from $1 from the city. Remember, this is also around the time where we had a lot of folks moving out of the city, like following the industry jobs. So Bethlehem Steel, for example, those types of companies that had the middle class jobs moved out of the city. A lot of people went with it. So Baltimore is built as a 1 million person city. We're sitting around 500,000 to 600,000. And so as people were moving out of the city, Baltimore City had a bunch of properties on their books. And so they had the Dollar House program. Now, back in the 80s, the requirement was that you lived in the property, but the city provided things like access to contractors, funding to do the renovations. They had a lot of support around the program. And if you've been following us for a long time, I've consistently said if something like the Dollar House program comes back, it was going to look completely different. Hashtag I told you so. Now, the new version of the Dollar House program, as it was represented to City Council to vote on back in March, I believe, was focused on a few things. One, you still had to live in the property. So shout out to everyone that wants to invest in Baltimore. These dollar houses, if you weren't planning on moving in the property, ain't for you, right? Number two, it was focused on legacy residents. So I'm always talking about we don't want Baltimore to be another DC, right? What I mean by that is we want more people to stay in Baltimore as Baltimore continues to change and develop, because it will, and it is, and it will continue to, right? And so wanting to make sure that folks are staying in the city and we're not pushing a ton of people out. So we want our legacy residents to be able to continue to participate in what's happening, going to happen in Baltimore. So what City Council President Nick Mosby did in drafting this legislation is say that not only do you have to live in these dollar houses, you also have to have resided in these neighborhoods for at least 10 years. And so this program is for legacy residents. This program is for folks who are going to live in the property. And there was a special focus on folks who are on vouchers, so have like a Section 8 voucher, something like that, or someone who is it'll be a voucher, legacy resident, or 80% or below of the average median income of the area. So that's who they were basically focusing on with that, right? So cool, right? Makes sense. We want to keep legacy residents. We want to be able to get some of these houses off the city books. So remember, Baltimore, over the years, we've been talking about 16,000 vacants. The market's been hot. So now we're down to like 15,000 vacants across the city. So let's get those properties off those books. Let's turn vacant houses into homes, and let's keep legacy residents. Check, 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 right? Those things are checked as far as how the package was structured. Now, back in March, there was a March 3rd, there was a vote in City Council about that program as I just described it, and it was rejected. All right, so we're going to talk about why it was rejected, in my opinion, and what publicly was said about other City Council members and Mayor Brandon Scott about why it was rejected. But so I wanted to get you caught up to where we are today, right? Can y'all drop a 1 in the chat if you're following? Because I know I'm talking fast, but I'm excited, and I have my coffee today. Drop a 1 if you are still up. Okay, I see you, New Dawn. All right, Kimo, thank you. All right, Tessa. All right. So let's keep it moving, right? So fast forward to today. It's been a lot of conversation, right? So we've had not only the Dollar House program as it was originally presented, we had it presented to City Council. City Council didn't pass, right? So we had to kind of keep it moving. What's happened since then is Mayor Brandon Scott announced that he's going to put $100 million towards eradicating vacants with the goal of getting rid of 10,000 vacants, leveraging that $100,000. It's a whole nother live that I got to do on another day. But what I want you to know is that we've continued to make and have conversations about vacant properties. So we have the $100 million set aside. We have Mayor Brandon Scott holding everybody accountable to making sure that folks in the city are doing the work to be able to work through the vacant housing issues. So if you have a vacant house or someone who does, they probably heard from the inspector in that area lighting a fire under them to get the work done, right? This is the folks that we said, hold up before you buy $5,000 houses and try to sit on them. Understand Baltimore's not playing that. They turned that up a couple notches, right? So after there was a house that collapsed with some firemen in it, unfortunately, it was a horrible situation. The city turned up their focus on eradicating vacants to like a whole nother level. So we have the $100 million going towards eradicating those vacants. We have the city focused on process. How are we holding these vacant property owners accountable? How are we pushing things through the receivership process as necessary, even to the point of, and I think this is also something City Council President Nick Mosby pushed, how are we fining vacant property owners more for sitting on these deals? So know that things have continued to happen. Just because the Dollar House program did not pass in March doesn't mean that the powers that be in city council and otherwise aren't doing things in regards to vacants. Okay. So now this brings us to last night. So last night it was a public hearing for city council. So folks were able to come. And in attendance was the CEO of a program called NACA, NACA. So NACA is a program that's underwritten by Bank of America. And the program, what's cool about it is there's no down payment, no closing costs. Buyers can buy down their interest rates. Their interest rates are lower than market. And you can still get multis as you can with FHA, which means you can get up to 4 units, right? So NACA has this program that can be really, really great for someone where this is their only property. So there are some contingencies there. You have to live in the property, right? Things like that. But as a concept, NACA program, I've been a fan. I've helped people buy properties with NACA. I've sold properties to people in NACA. I believe in what NACA is trying to do. Okay. I believe, hey, Nikki, how are you? Thank you so much. Nikki, if you want to join, I want to actually reach out so you can join the conversations. We have Nikki, who is the legislative director for City Council President Nick Mosby. I'm a fan of Nick, fan of his whole office, fan of Brandon, fan of Baltimore, fan of everybody. So just trying to share a little bit about what's going on. Don't let me get in trouble, Nikki. Go ahead and jump in the chat as you need to. So so I'm a fan of NACA, right, in general. So what was happening before Tuesday that came to us or came to me was some emails forwarded where NACA was getting folks excited about this conversation, right? What does it look like if we have these properties that were $1 that we are getting in the hands of these legacy residents and leveraging a program like NACA that has the low down payments, has the no closing costs, has all these pieces to help people get into the property, right? And so they're reaching out to NACA participants, getting them amped up about showing up. Thanks, Nikki. Getting people amped up about showing up and being part of the political process. So also remember, as all this chatter comes up, and there's some things again that we'll talk about that happened last night, that what we do need to remember is that it's great that people showed up and wanted to be part of that decision-making process and the political process. Super duper duper important. Now, what didn't go so well, and what Nick really was intentional about starting his day off with is we weren't going to do all that, right? So the CEO of NACA was amped up and kind of went a little bit off script, I'm sure, on kind of how he was part of the conversation last night and had some things to say about Mayor Brandon Scott, and they went to his office knocking on doors. It got weird, right? And really distracted, I think, from the essence of why NACA was in the room when it comes to how do we solve the issues and challenges that a lot of not only city council, but community members, investors, developers had with how the Dollar House program was originally written, right? How are people getting access to this funding? How are we making sure folks can afford to make this happen? All of those different pieces. So that was the drama of last night, right? It low-key kind of looked like a coup if you was paying attention to what was going on in not a coup, I probably shouldn't say that, but if you're watching what was going on via Twitter, it was looking a hot mess, right? And so what I want to do is kind of go through my thoughts and my opinion on where there's some opportunity points and where we can potentially find a middle ground between what all of us want, which is to turn vacant houses into homes, right? Make sure folks can stay, want to stay, can stay, and have great affordable housing, safe housing to do that, and be able to leverage the funding that we have, right? There's $641 million that Baltimore City has access to through the ARPA program, where tons of that money has been designated for quite a few different things. But how do we make sure we can get from A to Z, whether it's through this or other programs or processes that are out there? All right, let me do a quick chat review. So NACA, so let me go through a little bit more, right, with NACA, because I see some of you guys in the YouTube chat talking about it. So NACA as a concept, I love, right? I think one of the challenges, especially with NACA taking such a aggressive stance, probably a little too literally, on how they want to participate in this, is that NACA has its own set of challenges to be able to navigate, right? So when we've sold to people in NACA, or when we've supported folks who are using NACA to buy property in the city, we had to do a lot of things with preparing them for that process, which is number one, make sure you got your paperwork together, make sure you save everything, right? From an administrative perspective, I see a question on Instagram. The $641 million program is ARPA. It's ARPA money is related to COVID. And so that money is a one-time fund for the city, where Mayor Brandon Scott has been putting money towards that over the last couple months or so. So there's money towards getting equitable access to internet. There's money towards healthcare, right, and COVID relief. There's money towards getting folks access to trades. There's money towards homelessness and eradicating that. There's $100 million towards vacant housing. So, and Chloe, I see you in the chat in Instagram. I'm going to add you if I can as a moderator so that you can help keep everybody straight. So NACA, the challenges, right, is that administratively, there's a lot to be desired, right, with being able to get through the program. NACA is a nonprofit, and so it probably has those issues that you tend to see with nonprofits around just, making sure that, the left hand is talking to the right, making sure that things are moving forward. They're not underwriting the loans themselves. So Bank of America is. And so sometimes different paperwork and stuff gets lost in the shuffle a bit. And so all of that has an impact on what that process looks like, right? That's number one. Number two, when it comes to doing renovations, which again, if these houses are $1 and they've been vacant all of this time, the rehab is going to be substantial. So we're going to talk about that as a challenge with this program and how it's written, and conversations that Khalil and I and a ton of other people have had behind closed doors about the program. NACA doesn't have the best product currently with people who are doing rehabs. So there is a way to be able to get draws to do some work with and through NACA. But again, the process isn't really set up that way. One, two, you still have to do things like find your own contractor and make sure that stuff is correct. Thank you, Nikki. And three, and usually I can memorize, I have the ARPA money stuff memorized, but now I'm just shooting off the hip and can't remember all this stuff. And so NACA has its own set of challenges to work through, right? From an administrative perspective, from a product, being able to structure to do this level of renovations from draws, it's just not set up that way and that's coming from someone that worked with folks who tried to use NACA to do draws before. Okay. Kenzie said, I've been trying to go through the NACA process, but this market is insane. Exactly. That's the other thing. And this is outside of just NACA, no, is not for investors. One, NACA is for owner-occupied buyers. And not only that, it has to be the only property that you own. And number two, the Dollar House program, and this is for everyone, right? Because I want to make sure you understand this. The Dollar House program that Baltimore is talking about right now is not for investors who do not plan on living in the property. These are owner-occupied. This is an owner-occupied program and plan. And not only owner-occupied, but also for folks who have lived in these spaces, in these neighborhoods for at least 10 years. So it's very intentional about making sure this is for legacy residents. Okay, cool. Now, Cool. NACA does not have a renovation. Right. So they will do draws, but the other piece about the program as it's written, originally it was $25,000 grant to go towards renovations and kind of closing the gap. I think that's been updated since to $50,000. But that doesn't necessarily address the fact that when I'm doing these houses that I probably should either pay $1 for or somebody pay me to take because of the cost of renovation, I'm spending well over $100,000 consistently. And when I say well over 100,000, I mean right now probably over $150,000 consistently. And so it comes the question to say, how are we making sure that if we're putting the hands on folks, putting these properties in folks who are either legacy residents or voucher holders, how are they supposed to know how to navigate that process? How are they supposed to make sure that they're hiring the right contractor and getting through the process? How are we supposed to make sure that they're able to get through what I have spent the last 10 years learning, which is how to survive and find success through investing in Baltimore City. Baltimore is not for the faint of heart at all, period. And so there's a lot of different pieces that come behind being able to not only get folks access to properties for $1, but then it's getting through and succeeding and surviving the renovation process of these properties that are typically a front wall with a tree growing up the middle. And it's surviving, managing those contractors and getting those things done. Even if the contractors and construction teams are certified by Baltimore City, that does not guarantee that folks ain't gonna be crazy, right? Y'all already know for us, we own a construction company, a general construction company that is great, right? And I still am not going to pretend that the last 10 years I didn't spend time sparring with contractors in the street trying to get stuff done. So going through that process is really, really important and something that I don't think is it's not an easy answer. And I don't think that as this is written today that there's an answer for it. And I think that's part of the reason, one of the reasons why it didn't get pushed through is how are people actually going to get these projects done? One, and then there's the issue of, all right, everyone still has to be able to qualify for the loan. And not only qualify, especially if you're thinking about NACA, you have to have your paperwork in order. You can barely go to the store and get a stick of gum without getting it approved when you're going through the process. And those of you who have been with NACA, worked with NACA, have a NACA loan, y'all can vouch for that, right? You got to send your statements in every month. You got to make sure you're not making any significant purchases, which is standard for the most part when it comes to getting a loan in general, right? You don't want to make any major purchases while you're under contract or looking to buy a property. But with NACA, it's another step further because they want to make sure that you're budgeting correctly and that, you have your budget, makes sense. You're not doing all that stuff because like NACA is a long process. Exactly. What I usually say when it comes to NACA specifically is that what you save in money, you're going to spend a little bit on the front end when it comes to a bit of your sanity and a lot of time. If you understand that, then cool, right? But you have to make sure that understand that. Okay? You have to make sure that you understand that. Someone said, how are they going to know if you lived in the same neighborhood for 10 years or the city overall for 10 years? I'm not sure on the logistics of that. And that adds another challenge, right? Who's managing this project? So there's a lot so when the Dollar House program first came up, City Council President Nick Mosby was looking for $200 million out of the $641 million ARPA fund to be able to not only staff this, but also create the grants associated, whether that's for the renovation or for the senior citizens to get access to update properties that they already own. And I'm sure staffing as well. But the management of this program was going to be astronomical. And that is a problem. It's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. All right. So y'all got me out of I created notes of everything and y'all got me out here freestyling. NACA uses Bank of America to underwrite their loan. Sounds like a setup. Are there any opportunities for transplant to participate? So Chris, for transplants, real quick, and then I'm going to get back to my notes. If you haven't been in Baltimore for the last 10 years, right, and you don't fit all of the qualifications that I mentioned before, and please also remember, this program has not been approved by City Council. So all of this is just based on what we've read, what we've seen, and what's being talked about. There has not been another vote since the program was rejected back in March. So I want to make that very clear as well. For those who are not from Baltimore and you want to buy and live in Baltimore, I would highly recommend that you look into other programs that are out there for transplants or from people in Baltimore that want to move from one house to the other. There's tons of grants, forgivable loans, incentives to be able to buy property specifically to live in the city. And a great resource to do that is one of our partners, which is Live Baltimore. So you can go to livebaltimore.com to learn more about some of those grants and incentives that probably make more sense to look into versus what's going to happen with this Dollar House program, whether it gets approved or not. If you ain't from here, ain't been here for the last 10 years, it's important that you're aware, you know what it is and what it means. Because for investors, there is a benefit to something like this happening, right? Everyone wins if the vacant houses are turned into homes, but you ain't finna get a house for $1 if you haven't been here in the last 10 years. So just know and understand that. Yes, Carmelita, I was definitely sparring in the street with contractors, right? So understand, I was out here because sometimes you just gotta do it. Exactly. Cool. Now, all right. So I just want to get caught up in some of the chat. Now let's go into some of the things that I just think are part of the reason why it hasn't gone through yet and some things to work through. So one, we need education, right? So for folks to be buying vacant properties in Baltimore, and this is really one of the challenges that I think Baltimore has in a whole, is people are out here buying vacant properties, not knowing what they're doing. And this is exactly why we are doing what we're doing with putting people, like educating and making sure folks know how to find success in investing in Baltimore, whether that's through free classes, conversations like this, or our Next Gen Accelerator program, or when we're doing bus tours through Mobilize Baltimore. Folks are buying houses and they don't understand Baltimore is not set up like all these other cities. I don't care what you've done anywhere else, and neither does Baltimore when it comes to doing these properties. And so if we are serious about making sure that we're getting folks access to, we're turning these vacant houses into homes, and we're, providing access to legacy residents, we need to make sure that the people who are doing the work are educated on how to make it happen. How do you take a vacant house that's been blighted for the last 40 years and make it into a home? It's not just as easy as let's just hire this one contractor, because that doesn't always work, right? So the things that Baltimore is doing that's great is expanding trade programs, making sure that we're getting more people into the construction trades, so that we're hiring within the neighborhoods and within the city, which is really important. I know there's some conversation about getting more city certifications for contractors, which I think is great to help kind of clear the noise. But again, right, there's still a requirement that you as a property owner at the end of the day are liable for what's happening at your property. And so we need to make sure that folks are educated on how to invest in their own neighborhoods. Number two, we have to make sure that as investors are in and will continue to be buying in Baltimore, because everybody sees what's happening here, right? The the average cost of the properties, purchase price in properties, increased 27%, I believe, from 2020 to 2021, right? Property values are increasing so quickly. And we're seeing response to that, right? So today, Mayor Brandon Scott just announced that he's increasing one of the grants for first-time home buyers from $10,000 to $20,000 to make sure that they can still compete as property values are increasing. But at the end of the day, everyone's watching and folks are buying these houses. And so that 15,000 vacant property number that's thrown around all the time, one, it's probably not all inclusive, because it only includes properties that are registered as vacant by the city. So there's vacant houses that aren't registered as vacant. So there's probably more. And two, the city doesn't own all 15,000 properties. Yes, everything for Selena is a CDBG. Yes, so they're relaunching or reimagining, I guess, what CDBG that grant is. The Community Development Block Grant, starting May 1st, rather than that grant being $10,000, it'll be $20,000. This was just announced today. And so we need to make sure that we're holding investors accountable to getting the work done, right? We have to hold folks accountable. So sitting on properties cannot be it. We don't have time for that, right? There's work to be done. Get out of the way if you're not trying to do it with us. And that's on point blank in the period. That's why we have Next Gen. That's why they're buying millions of dollars worth of properties, because we want people educated on how to get the work done, right? Turn the vacant houses into homes. We're not speculating, we're doing the work. So that's number two. So how do you hold them accountable? That's by making sure, at the very least, right, some of the probably what was or maybe is a resource for folks to buy properties is through a program called One House at a Time, which is where the city, after they take property, they take properties through the receivership process. So that means that these properties weren't being done. They were sitting on the market, or someone was supposed to do work and they didn't, right? Or they bought a property from the city. There's a requirement that the property is under renovation within 12 months. If it's not, technically the city can take that property back. And so with the receivership process, the city's taking back problematic properties, and then it's auctioned off through an auctioneer called One House at a Time, or OHAT. Now, during COVID, OHAT went virtual like everybody else. Well, the challenge with that is now, instead of sitting in the room in Mount Washington like we used to bid on these properties, you could do it from the comfort of your home. And so we had investors who don't understand Baltimore bidding up properties, something wild and crazy, to the point where it's just impossible to compete, one, right, to get access to the properties and purchase them as someone from Baltimore who understands the actual numbers. And two, and this is the biggest issue, in my opinion, there's no way these people are going to be able to afford to get the property from A to Z based on what they're paying for it. Because I know the construction, unless they finna go and swing every hammer themselves and salvage all the wood when lumber was 300%, had an increase in price by 300%, there was no way these folks were getting the property done, and the numbers still make sense, right? So at a certain point, the cost of renovation, particularly in some really critical areas across the city, your renovation costs could be higher than the property value once the rehab's completed. We call it the after repair value. How much is a property worth after you repair it? The challenge in Baltimore is some places the cost of renovation is higher than that after repair value, than how much a property will be worth once it's done. And so if you're overpaying on the front end to purchase the property, you're not going to be able to get it completed. And so there's some auctioneers and places where folks are bidding up properties to the point where there's no way you're getting funding to get this done, number one, and you're going to be underwater. The amount that you are putting into the property is not going to make sense for how much a property is worth. And so when those types of things happen, we create and continue this cycle of people buying vacant properties, getting stuck in them, and can't finish. And when you can't finish, that's when these properties are just sitting there. Understand that the vacant house problem, we can point the finger all day long on whose fault it is for these properties to be sitting there, but no one understands a vast majority, probably 85, 90% almost of 80, I'm making up the numbers, right? But a vast majority of those properties are held by investors and individuals, not the city. And I think that people miss that point a lot when they're talking about what's happening across the city when it comes to vacant properties. Beyond the fact that no one wants to talk about redlining, nobody wants to talk about our population base, nobody wants to talk about all of these other things, that needs to be part of the conversation as well. Okay. So what do you think would make sense what's the solution for the proposal for Nick? I think it has to be more all inclusive. So how are we bringing in things like making sure we are partnering with some of the organizations that are doing the housing counseling and credit counseling? Let's make sure that people can afford to qualify to get access to this funding in the first place. Let's start there, right? And so that takes a lot of collaboration. Y'all know we're all about collaboration. So it's going to take a lot of people to come to the table, a lot of organizations, but we can do that, right? That should be an easy fix. Two is making sure that there are lenders who are ready and prepared to work with the folks who would qualify for this. So legacy residents, voucher holders, things like that, who are ready and prepared to do a 203K type of loan with these buyers. And so that's going to require them to not only have that type of product, but also have the counselors and the consultants with the capacity to provide that much more support to the home buyer, because we don't have the education piece to understand how to go through this process, right? Then the next piece is, who are the contractors? Who are the contractors to do this work, who can take properties from A to Z, right? Especially when they have this level of renovation necessary, so that folks aren't working in the dark with trying to hire data in them to go do their house. No shade of data, but data ain't set up for this, right? Then the next piece is making sure that, like, how does all of this work if the cost of renovation, which again, right, consistently we're spending well over $150,000 to do these renovations of these vacant properties. That $50,000 grant folks talking about ain't finna cut it. It's just not, right? And so if that money was being leveraged to fill the gap, and what I mean by that is the gap of how much am I paying for my renovation versus how much is property actually going to be worth. Remember, we were just talking about that after repair value versus the cost of renovation. If that grant is to fill the gap so that we know and understand this rehab is going to cost more than the value of this home right now, but we're going to subsidize that through this grant, that might make a little bit more sense. There is a proposal right now that's out there called the appraisal gap bill, with the intention of helping to fill that gap. That's exactly what that's for the appraisal gap bill. Chat, Khalil, if you're in the chat, if you can, I know they changed the name of it, but if you can drop that in the chat, that'd be great. So those pieces are critical to making this make sense. Now, the whole other piece is that, remember, there's 15,000 vacants, but the city probably only has control of less than 2,000 of them. And so if that's the case, where are these properties? Does it actually make sense? What is the balance between demolition and rehabilitation and redevelopment? And then, does it make sense, right? With the 2,000 that the Baltimore City already has access to. Can you specify the zip codes of the dollar homes? Again, this is not an approved program yet. This is not an approved program yet. City Council has not, they actually rejected it in March. So it's just coming back up in conversation because of drama that happened last night when it came to really the CEO of NACA, where I think City Council President Nick Mosby was trying to create some of those alignments with programs that conceptually makes sense to leverage for this type of thing, but just probably isn't the right, might not be set up for complete success right now, just the way it's set up, at least in this region. For NACA, it's hard to get people through. It takes a lot of time, and they don't seem to be set up to be able to do this size of renovation. But like, he was trying to fill the gaps of the challenge, right? It's just, he had a little bit of a wild card in there at the meeting where, and again, City Council President Nick Mosby started his day at Board of Estimates apologizing for the foolishness. But now we all in the headlines again. So what can you do? Thank you, Khalil. The appraisal gap bill is now called Home Ownership Works, the HOW program. I lived in Baltimore in 1984 to 1996, then moved back in 2014 to now. Can I still qualify as a legacy resident? As the program is currently written, you have to live in the city for 10 consecutive years, is how it reads to me. Okay. Jamal said purposely overbidding, aka gentrification. When it comes to the auctions, I mean, I think it's a lot of things. I will tell you, I know for a fact that hedge funds are out here doing wild stuff when it comes to acquiring property in the city, which is driving property cost up, purchase prices up. That's why the auctions are crazy. That's why it's really important you know where to go and how to look for properties on your own, right? Off market deals and things like that are really important. If you're working with an agent, you want somebody who's going to be a ninja and pull properties quickly and get them to you. You want to have your pre-approvals together. You want to have your stuff together. As it relates to the dollar house program, this is not an active program now. Ain't no house that you can get for $1 right now through this program because it has not been approved. But what's important is, one, we understand what's really, what's going on. Two, it was time to talk about what some of those challenges were, at least at a high level, on why it hasn't been approved and what some of the issues is, why people are saying it's a setup, right? Things like that, because there's some gaps in solving the challenges of the program today, where the thought, right, and the concept and what we're trying to do makes sense, but it's the execution, right? Can we execute it in a way that's going to hit the goals of the program? And personally, I don't think it's all the way there. I don't. And that is because of the reasons why I shared, right? The cost of renovation, the making sure people can actually qualify, who are the lenders going to be, are they going to how they're going to handle the gap in the cost of rehab versus the value of the property, who's doing the work, like all of those pieces just need to be answered. And there aren't answers today. And I think what the challenge is, there's only, it's crazy to say only, but there's only $641 million. And a lot of that has already been earmarked. So then it becomes who's paying for this stuff. At the end of the day, we need to turn these vacant houses into homes, and we need to make sure that we're holding space and making sure that folks who want to stay in Baltimore can, right? And so we personally, Charm City Buyers, we do a lot when it comes to affordable housing, right? Making sure the developments that we have and are working on have set aside for affordable housing, partnering with organizations and nonprofit that focus on affordable housing, so that when we're doing market rate housing, we have affordable housing in the same neighborhoods that have the same contractor, same granite countertops, right? The same recessed lighting, the whole 9 yards. You can't tell the difference between market rate and affordable, but we have the opportunity to keep and provide both. There are some properties in Baltimore that literally you couldn't pay me right now to take because of, again, the cost of renovation versus the value of the property. The city would essentially have to pay me to do the deal just based on the numbers. And so with the dollar house program, yes, it sounds great sometimes to get a property for $1. That sounds amazing. But it's important that we think through all of the impacts and all of the different things that come with owning a house, being an investor, getting access to funding and financing, being able to get your rehab done. It's important that all of that is part of the analysis on making that decision, because there are absolutely properties that I would not take for $1. Just wouldn't do it. Right? When you do the numbers, I have a $50,000-$60,000 deficit. And so through the how program, what is it? Home ownership works, that has been presented to state legislature. That type of program helps to answer those questions. But again, like those types of concepts and things are just, it's a lot. It's a lot. And so to be able to, make, folks who don't do this for a living try to figure that stuff out is a big ask. It's a big ask. Okay. Yes, thank you, Lily. Make sure if you're watching on Instagram, make sure you hit that like button. There's like a lot of y'all in here. About half of y'all hit that like button. So I don't always go on YouTube, so I forget that. So thank you, Lily. Appreciate that. And so what I want to do now is just open it up for some questions. Hopefully that gives you a good flavor for like what's happening, what's going on, and why. Some thoughts that I personally have about what opportunities there are. Nikki, if you're still on here, I know we talked to Nick, literally saw Nick a couple days ago. Would love to have him talk about this with us, to just share and brainstorm together, or just kind of share his thoughts and what he wants to do. Would love to give that. I would love to have that opportunity with him as well. Do you know how effective the vacant to value open bid list has been? So vacants to value, thank you for bringing that up. So we're talking about Dollar House program, which is a proposal, right? A proposed program to kind of bring back. But don't forget that vacants to value is still an option. It's still there. So vacants to value is a program that the city currently has to bid on and buy property. Ooh, let me make sure my phone not about to die on y'all on Instagram. To buy property from Baltimore City. So properties that are city controlled and owned. So that program still exists. No, the properties aren't for $1. Typically, folks are it depends on how much you have to bid on it. Usually those folks are going for at least $5,000, if not more. You always want to pay attention to the numbers, right? So you want to make sure that things like that you're paying attention to the numbers. How much is property going to be worth? How much is the rehab going to be? Again, remember there's properties and areas and stuff that you couldn't pay me to take. And so if they can't pay me to take, you might not want to be a sucker and try to get it yourself. So make sure you understand how to run those numbers. That is something that we're very, very intentional about doing with folks in our mentorship program. I see Lily said, do you have to live in Baltimore to be in the mentorship program? No, you don't. We have folks all over the country, even internationally, that are in our Next Gen Accelerator. So no, you don't need to be in Baltimore to do it. So yeah, the Vacants of Value program still exists, still opportunities there. You can still bid. Not only can you still bid, they also have an expression of interest and EOI process where you can say, hey, I'm interested in looking at these properties. There's literally, they actually had a walkthrough this morning at 10 o'clock. So Vacants to Value and DHCD is still giving folks access to properties that are city owned. You just need to know and understand how to go through that. So know that too, just because you're bidding $5,000 or $100 or $10,000, you need to be able to show the city that not only can you purchase a property, but you can complete the project. So you need to have the funding, prove that you have the funding to not only acquire, but to complete the renovation. So you may need to have a pre-approval, things like that. They're also going to want to see who's on your team. They're going to want to know what your experience is. So do you know how to get this work done? Do you have, who's your contractor and what properties have they done? So those things are going to be important for the vacancy value. If you're going to bid on something that is not listed, the little thing to set up my phone is on the table in the kitchen. If you, what was I saying? If you're bidding on a property that is not explicitly listed for vacancy value, so you're doing what's called an unsolicited bid. You're bidding on a property without anybody asking you to, because maybe you saw it on online as being city owned, but it's not listed on the vacancy value website. You can do an unsolicited bid. But if you do that, once the city gets the bid, they're going to blast it out to everyone to say, hey, we got this bid. Anybody else want to play ball and counter or also bid on this property? So just understand that is the process. Yes, Kamali said numbers always matter. Were there any developers or people in the real estate or planning space helping to advise the council? There's always conversations happening behind closed doors. I know we've been part of quite a few. I don't think that we specifically were, unless Claude can tell me otherwise, talk to you about like this Dollar House program specifically. But usually when things are happening, it comes up with us behind closed doors. talk to a lot of people about a lot of things behind closed doors, which is why we don't sit on social all day anymore, or whatever. So anyway, thank you so much. Yep, the replay will be here. If you weren't able to join the entire time, you're definitely going to want to catch the replay. If you're watching now on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button. Doing Q&A right now for those who have questions. Myrna, I'm currently looking at a property in Baltimore. Would someone be able to give me a comp? It's a multi-use property on Bloomingdale Road. So multi-use properties are a little bit harder to comp out. You could try to work with an agent that does some commercial properties. They may be able to help you with that. Otherwise, look to see what other properties have been bought or sold in the area that are also multi-use. You may be able to expand your the area that you're looking in, because there's going to be a limited number of comps to look at. But yeah, that's a little bit more technical than I can do on here. Jasmine, thanks you so much for your help always. Of course. Instagram, you guys too. If you guys have questions, definitely drop them in there. But at the end of the day, the things that you should know about the Dollar House program is, one, it's still kind of a concept and idea. It has not been approved. And to take it a step further, it was already rejected in March. But I'm assuming that the plan is to give City Council another opportunity to vote again on it, with some of these issues and challenges answered, right? I think last night the intention was to show, okay, cool, we have this program that's set up to really provide folks an opportunity to buy properties, first-time home buyers. It's no down payment, no closing costs, has all of these great benefits. Here's one of the solutions to the challenge, but it's just that they became another challenge by kind of going off the rails a little bit, which, was a little embarrassing to say the least. So for those of you who are also looking to learn more, if you go to the link in our bio on Instagram, or I'll also drop it. You can go to charmcitybuyers.com. You'll be able to find it probably a little bit of everywhere. But there is a live free class, even though apparently class is in session now, this upcoming Thursday, to talk more detail, and talk about things like, where do you look, what neighborhoods and communities that are upcoming or have opportunities, how do you find where to look, like what neighborhoods and communities and areas should I be focusing on. So we'll be talking about that on this upcoming Thursday during our live class. Okay. If you want to stay the most up to date on what we're doing, what opportunities there are when we're doing free classes and chats, make sure you're following us on Instagram at Charm City Buyers, because that's where we post the most often. Those of you who are interested in our Next Gen Accelerator, you definitely want to be part of that conversation. You can also learn more at Charm City Buyers about our Next Gen Accelerator, which is our mentorship program focused on making sure that we have investors buying property in Baltimore who know what they're doing. So not only turning vacant houses into homes for home ownership, but also buying rental properties, buying portfolios, doing rehabs, things like that. That is what our Next Gen Accelerator is all about. So we don't have to talk about like conceptually investing in real estate, but like literally you're buying property in Glens Falls, and here's what you should know or be thinking about to make that happen. Okay. Awesome. There is a class on live or via private link. The class on Thursday, you will need to register. So make sure you click the link in our bio in order to register. Y'all trying to get me in trouble today. Is Ashland Homes, that auctioneer, legit? So it is really an auctioneer, absolutely. It's probably one of the first ones that you'll find when you're searching for houses in Baltimore, because a lot of times people are looking for the cheapest thing they can find. A lot of times you're going to come across Ashland. We've bought property from Ashland before, especially when we first started out. I think it's a starting place for a lot of folks when they're new to Baltimore investing. I, just like everybody everywhere else, you want to know your numbers, you want to know and understand the neighborhood and community, and you want to do your due diligence, period. And that's with everyone, including Ashlyn. So I'm always going to be the one to say, do not get caught up in how much you're buying the property for. Make sure you know and understand how much that renovation is going to be, how much that property is going to be worth at the end. Know and understand how you're trying to fund it and what they're looking for, what their requirements are. If you're trying to do a refinance, make sure you understand the terms of what that looks like and what that means. And then with all of that, it should give you guidance on how much you can actually buy the property for. $5,000 may not be a good price for a property, just like $1 may not be a good price for a property. And so you need to know and understand that so that you're not causing more issues for Khalil and I, which is by buying vacant houses, getting stuck in it. You can't complete it. Now your vacant house is on the block, messing up our comps, right? Messing that stuff up for everybody. So make sure you're educated and know what you're doing, and not just you know what you're doing in general, but you know what you're doing in Baltimore, so that you can find success. The community wins because we're turning vacant houses into homes, and we're getting from A to Z. Because a lot of people get past A, right? They find a house, they buy a property real quick, right? They're excited. Whoop. I'm posting on Instagram. I got me a house. Bop, bop, bop. I'm an investor now. Hey, but you can't do nothing with it. Now you stuck with it. You got the city sending you letters, inspectors calling you every 5 minutes. You can't get funding for it. You're stressed out. Taxes are due. Water's due. You're trying to figure out why you got a water bill. Ain't no plumbing in the house, right? Let's skip that part and know what we're doing first, so that we are adding value and not just trying to take it away. Okay. How you know where and what neighborhood zip codes buyers are buying in, and what are the buy numbers? Join the class on next Thursday. Join the class next Thursday so that you can be part of that conversation, so that you can learn exactly how to look, right? We talk about following the money. You want to join that class. I recently acquired a property in Baltimore and needs complete renovation. Where you suggest I go for funding? I'm not going to call you out, Carla, but I'm going to do a little bit. I'm going to use you as an example, right? When you're buying properties, you should know where your funding is coming from on the front end, right? You should have a plan for what you're doing before you do it. And I think that because social media and posting, it's easy to post a picture, but a lot of times people are showing like a highlight reel, right? We're really big on showing the good, bad, and the ugly, and trying to just be real about it. But yeah, you want to make sure that on the front end for everybody, right? You know and understand what your full plan is. From a funding perspective, you have an idea of what that rehab is going to be. You know your numbers, all of those pieces, because it's critically important. There's a lot of people who buy property and then try to find funding later and can't get it. And I'm not saying that's going to happen to you, but I am saying to everyone else, don't be that person. What do you think about Franklin Square? I recently started renovating a 3-story there. Franklin Square is it's pretty residential over there. I mean, I don't see shouldn't be too much issue. Okay. If you're going to pay to learn, you're going to pay with time. Look, let me tell you something. And this is why, one, we have the Next Gen Accelerator and why we do it. And two, why we're so passionate about making sure that y'all just don't see us on islands and turning up a little bit without making sure folks know that we've been doing this for 10 years. Right. And the first couple of years of that, we was out here just wilding, doing anything. Stuff didn't make sense, but we just kept going. Right. And so we've written them checks that don't feel too good in this gut area because of some foolishness. And so my goal is that less people are doing that, because if more of us are finding success in investing in real estate and not wasting the time and the money and the energy and the stress on learning things the hard way, we can collectively make more progress and therefore try to balance things out when it comes to the fact that we are competing with hedge funds when it comes to investing in Baltimore right now. I mean, that's just a fact. I literally had a call with someone who said, because we are doing this project, we're working on, we'll be announcing very soon, a new construction project that we'll be doing in East Baltimore. And I was talking to someone who wanted to be part of our funding team. And they're like, well, we have a connection with such and such hedge fund. You guys could skip all of X, Y, and Z and just sell to the hedge fund. First of all, I was like, you didn't research me before you got on the phone talking some foolishness, because I'm not doing that, because that is not who we are. That's not what we do. But know that those conversations are happening behind closed doors, and they're not always talking to me. And so that's why it's critically important that we have folks who know and understand what they're doing when it comes to getting this work done, because we will get passed by. We will get passed by if we're not in position to keep up and to get the stuff done. Oh, Carla, via inheritance, not in purchase. Sorry, Carla. Well, hopefully what I said was helpful anyway, without calling you out. So if it's just via inheritance, you may want to look into doing things like a refinance, or I'm assuming you own it free and clear now. So you could probably talk to just about anybody almost. You probably want a conventional refi if you're not going to live in the property, to be able to get money out to do the renovation. If you wanted to live in the property, you can refinance a property into a 203k loan. So you just want to talk to the right mortgage broker. Yes, hedge funds are going nuts all over the country for sure, but especially in Baltimore right now. All right. Thanks for looking to join next Thursday's class. Yes, make sure y'all get in where you fit in on Thursday. But yes, so you're either, when you're kind of trying to figure it out and shooting at the hip, you can either invest in yourself and your future by connecting with the right people, or just invest in learning the hard way and just know that's what you're going to do. Just know that you're going to mess it up. It's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time. You're going to be stressed out. Some people learn that way. So if you're one of them, let me touch the stove and burn myself first, then go for it. But no, I reserve the right. If you circle the block and try to come back later, I might call you out. I might call you out. Like, you should have just joined the family and skipped the problem. Also, for those of you who are on here still, we do have our Mobilize Baltimore bus tour is June 18th. So that is when we spend the day going to commercial developments. We go to residential projects. We go all over the city to talk about not only what we're doing, but what other folks are doing around the city when it comes to development, and how that impacts what's going on in different neighborhoods and communities across the city. So we only have, I think, like, I don't even know, like 30 seats left. And it's not until June. So make sure in YouTube, it's in the description, the link to be able to join or to get your ticket. Make sure you do that. One, it's a vibe, because we know how to have a good time. It's always a lot of fun. It's tons of information. It's tons of access. It literally blows people's mind every single time. But two, it really puts you in a better position to think about what it is you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. So make sure that you check that out. You can also search Eventbrite for Charm City Buyers. It should pop up right there as well. But if you go to the link in YouTube or the link in our bio on Instagram, you can get your tickets, because we always sell out. And I'm pretty sure we will be completely sold out by at least a month in advance. But at least you get in the room and you're with us, right? Like, it's us on the bus with you, walking through properties, pointing things out, making sure you know what's going on. We usually go to a couple different commercial development projects in the morning, and in the afternoon, we go to a few different residential projects that are all in different stages. So one that is completely needs to be renovated still, something that's framed, something completed, and walk through the whole 9 yards. Okay. Yep. So the people in Next Gen, yes, have an opportunity to work with our construction company as long as we have capacity, right? So that's the other thing. We actually does this, and so we have to make sure we have capacity. But we do try to prioritize folks in Next Gen. And there's always a connection with Next Geners. So for sure. Are there any other loan programs besides the 203k loan to refinance? There's tons of loan programs. The 203k to refi is important if you are trying to, you're going to live in the property, one, and two, you need to do renovations. You want to have something like a low interest or lower interest, if the interest rate's going up, a lower interest option to get access to funding to do your rehab. 203ks are a good option. And a lot of people don't realize that you can refinance, into a 203K. So get access to that kind of funding for a property that you're going to live in. So if you own something free and clear that you want to move into, or something that was inherited and that needs work, but you plan on living in it, a 203K could be a really good option to make that happen. Okay. What is Next Gen? So the Next Gen Accelerator is our mentorship program focused on investing in Baltimore City. So building a rental, buying rental properties, doing rehab in Baltimore, where we're really going through soup to nuts live. There is a curriculum component, but being able to talk to someone several times a week about where you are in your process of investing in property in Baltimore, surrounded by other people who are investing in property in Baltimore. That is what Next Gen's all about. Okay. Are you able to use a VA home loan on any of this? Thanks, Quill. Yeah. I don't know what you mean, any of this specifically, but VA home loans are dope. So if you are a veteran, definitely want to use it. So yeah, so thanks you guys for joining. Hopefully this was helpful and informative on what is going on with the Dollar House program, why it's top of news right now, how it's set up, and what some of the challenges are that I think really need to be worked through to figure out how to do this stuff the right way. But at the end of the day, what I'm really excited about is public officials, city council, the mayor's office, all those folks, as well as developers, investors, community members, associations, legacy residents, everyone's talking. And so I can have this conversation and have someone from City Council President Nick Bosby's team in the live while we're talking about it, because we're all trying to collaborate to solve these issues and solve these problems so that we can help make sure that Baltimore continues to be as great as it is. And that, I think, is what will continue to set Baltimore apart, is that there's a seat at the table for a lot of different people, and we're able to talk and collaborate and communicate and try to figure out, how do we get these goals done, right? How do we turn these vacant houses into homes, and how do we keep the charm in Charm City? So thank you guys for joining. Looking forward to chatting with you all more very, very soon. The Mobilize Baltimore bus tour, June 18th, is a great time to get in the room with Chloe and I to talk about all of this. And we also have a free live class next week to get into the nitty gritty about the history in Baltimore. We're talking about, where do you look for properties? What are some of the stats of what's happening in the city right now? And what is it that you need to know to pull it all together for yourself? So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Peace.